Hi humans, it's Hannah. Welcome back to the second channel and welcome to day 5 of the 7 days of Halloween. I apologize for yesterday, but we're right back on our way now. So yeah, I don't think I have any other intros. If you guys want to submit your own scary story, instructions for how to do that are always below in the description. So let's get right into the stories for today. This first one starts, "Hi Hannah, it's Human. I hope you're doing well. I haven't been a subscriber for super long, about a couple months from writing this story, but I have binged so many of your videos from both channels and just want to say that you're one of the best and most genuine creators on this app, and I've loved every video that you've put out. Thank you. Thank you. Now for the story. You can refer to me as Rose, she, her, if needed. I tell everyone this story whenever the subject of paranormal experiences comes up. It might be pretty long since I want to give the most detail as possible. About 4 to 5 years ago, when I was in high school, there was a time where I started to see really strange things. It started out of nowhere. At the time, I had blackout curtains in my room, which made my room fairly dark during the day. I'm a pretty low energy person, so I've always loved a good nap after coming home from school. When I took these naps, I left my bedroom door open. One day, after I had woken up from one of these naps, I was sat up on the edge of my bed on my phone. I noticed that in the corner of my eye, what seemed to be a little dark figure poking its head out from behind my door. Now, I know the inside joke of ghosts seeming to always peek around corners, but please, I swear that's what they were doing. I believe you, Rose. Don't worry. Anyway, when I turned to look, it disappeared. So I brushed it off and went back to my phone. After a few moments, I saw it again in the corner of my eye, so I turned again, but it disappeared. By the third time it happened, I just watched it through my peripheral vision, and it seemed to slowly poke in and out from the door frame. The figure had the shape of a doll, the cliche witchcraft type doll with a large round head and stubby round limbs, and it was about 6 inches tall. It was completely black and had no discernible features other than its shape. I know peripheral vision can be tricky to trust, so I wasn't sure if I should believe what I was watching, but I didn't feel scared at all, which is very strange. I was the type of kid, teenager, and even adult now to be spooked pretty easily when it came to paranormal things. I looked at the figure one last time. It disappeared, of course, but it didn't come back again. The next time this happened, I was getting up from another nap. As I was sitting up from my bed, I see the figure of this little doll scurry from the corner of my room to under my bed. Weirdly enough, I still wasn't scared. Typing this now is giving me chills, but in that moment, I was just like, that was weird, and got up. So far, it sounds like it could have been some weird hallucination right after waking up. But the third time I saw it, I was downstairs, not having taken a nap and in broad daylight. I was on my phone sitting at the table and I saw it behind the corner of the wall that covered my hallway. Because I was familiar with this happening, I didn't look up immediately and watched through the peripheral at the top of my vision. It was doing the same in and out peeking motion that it did the first time I ever saw it. Then it went away when I looked up. After that, I decided to finally tell my mom about it. Her face remained very serious and didn't say anything. After I told her, she just nodded and said something along the lines of, "That's interesting," and that was that. I was kind of upset at first because I didn't really know what to make of her reaction, but I didn't make a fuss about it. Fast forward the next day, I'm sitting on the couch and hear this loud breaking sound coming from my backyard. I run back to find my parents, my mom with a hammer in hand breaking a large vase that we owned. For context, it was a red and black vase that sat at the top of our stairs, and I found it pretty, so my first reaction was to be upset because I really liked the vase. My mom told me to get back inside and that she would explain. Turns out that vase had been used in witchcraft practices. A long time ago, my grandma from my dad's side had been practicing witchcraft, so when my dad was a young adult, he had also been practicing that stuff too. Specifically things with dolls. From what my mom said, he would burn the dolls in that vase. As you can imagine, I was shocked. I never would have expected anything like that. Apparently, my dad had stopped practicing that a long time ago, but kept the vase and had brought it to our different houses over time. When I told my mom about what I was seeing, she had told my dad, and that's when they decided to get rid of the vase by breaking it. Sure enough, to this day, I haven't seen any of those little doll silhouettes. However, I found it strange that even though we had a vase like that forever, I only started seeing the dolls seemingly out of nowhere. Anyway, that's really the only paranormal experience I've ever had, and I would like to keep it that way. If you read this story, thank you so much, and I hope you and the viewers enjoyed. If you have any theories as to what it could have been that was causing it, I'd love to hear them. Please give all your pets hugs and kisses for me. Rose. Thank you, Rose. Oh my gosh. No, I don't have anything. I don't know. And I know that we joke about ghosts peeking around the corner, but like that's when people magically seem to get them on camera for the most part. It's just that, like, again, it's not that I don't believe people's stories. It's just that when they have it on film, it's just almost always too convenient to be true. So like, yeah, no, I fully believe you that regardless of whether it was paranormal or if there was some sort of psychological explanation or logical explanation, it doesn't really change the fact that you experienced something scary, but pretty crazy that your parents were like, you told them that and your parents were like, okay, time to get rid of that face. Very, very interesting. Okay, the second story starts, my name is Ella Shiva and I'm 25. I don't mind if you use my name. I'm from a lower income family and I was raised mostly non-religiously affiliated, but my mom is Jewish and I grew up with some of the traditions from her family. This is relevant later. I have a pretty varied group of friends, and a few years back I was close with a few people that are into psychics, magic, etc., which I thought was cool, and I was certainly willing to learn about practices outside of my own. However, I am someone who doesn't really believe in magic or psychics or anything. I respect it if people do, but I just personally don't. A few years ago, a friend of mine from that group, who we will call Sally, wanted to introduce me to her friend that claimed to be a clairvoyant / psychic / whatever. And since I am lower income, the fact that this event / display of talent from a supposed psychic was free made it fun and exciting thing to do. Sally took me to this social gathering and introduced me to the psychic named Alice. I couldn't figure out why, but Alice gave me the creeps. There was something incredibly off-putting in the way that she acted. It might have been the fact that she had these sort of eyes that appeared to be x-raying you or undressing you. I don't know. I was sitting at the table with all of them and she was reading tarot for one of the other people there. She stopped mid-reading, looked at me dead in the eyes and smiled in a weird way and plainly said that one of my mom's familial surnames from back in the 1910s, from when they came to America. I was about to shit myself because I had never told Sally or any of our other friends this surname from that side, and it is a very uncommon one, and no one currently alive in our family has it. I tried to act like I didn't hear her and play it off, but I was so uncomfortable for the rest of the night. At first I thought maybe she was psychic, but then my assumption became that she figured out who I was through Sally's Facebook and did a deep dive on Ancestry or something, which is just as unsettling, especially since she couldn't be chill about it. That's exactly what I was thinking, is that did she know that you're a skeptic and so she really wanted to make you a believer, so she did some Googling or something of your family history, which again, like you said, that would also be crazy, but you know, psychics are known for doing that. It is known as more like warm or hot reading. Cold reading is when they're just trying to make guesses based on your body language and your leads. Hot or warm reading is when they are making guesses that are not guesses at all because they know stuff about you and your life that you don't know that they know. So yeah. Anyway, okay. The story doesn't end there, though. Every year on my birthday, I go to my local Jewish cemetery to place pebbles on the headstones that are super old that don't get visitors. The Jewish cemetery in the area is in a really remote area, super private, and most people who aren't a part of the congregation do not know that it's there. It is also completely hidden and you cannot see it from the road. So on my birthday, which was a few months after the creepy interaction with Alice, my mom drove me there and sat in the car and waited for me to place a few. As I was placing the pebbles, I saw a car pull in and I thought that was strange, but I figured maybe someone was stopping by to pay a loved one a visit. Wrong. It was Alice. As soon as I saw her, I went right to my mom's car. Before I closed the door, I heard her say, "I thought I knew you would be here." And I told my mom that we had to leave, and I just said, "Gotta go," to Alex. She looked confused and angry as we sped off. I explained the whole story to my mom, including the thing about the surname. My mom, who is admittedly a little superstitious and kind of believes in that sort of thing to a degree, immediately panicked, but not for the reasons I thought. She agreed with me that Alice was creepy and maybe had a fixation on me and was keeping tabs on me / finding info about me. We went back to my mom's place and spent the evening hanging out and having pizza and laughing together. Months later, Alice was arrested for stalking someone else, and I have since moved far away, so I haven't seen or heard from her at all. Thank goodness. Your story just ends there? That's the rest of the story? That's it? Are you kidding? That was a plot twist of the century. What? Okay, so Alice was not psychic. She was stalking you. Either one of those answers is super creepy, but I did not expect. I thought that was going to be the story. I did not expect that to take such a crazy turn. Just leave us with that? She got arrested for stalking someone else. Okay. Alice, the psychic, sounds like she needs Jesus. Jeez. Okay. All right. The next story for today starts. Hi. My name is Adeline and I am 19, totally okay if you mention my name/age, and I'm writing with a story that happened to me while I was in high school that has still confused me to this day. It's one of the strangest experiences I've had in a long time, and I could never figure out if it was just association or if something really was odd. For context, this happened to me when I was around 6 years old. I had re-downloaded TikTok and got sucked into the witchy side of the internet. I knew TikTok likely didn't have the most credible information, so I did a lot of online research regarding opening practices that I was interested in. I decided to practice a lot of intention work, mostly saying messages over crystals, taking those crystals to tests with me to do better, etc. Mostly little things to enhance my life and make me feel protected. My close family friend is a yoga instructor and has always been spiritual, so it felt nice to connect with that. While I was researching, I stumbled upon a fairy or fae lore. I was really interested, and most sources spoke about leaving offerings in wooden areas or even in your backyard to connect and speak with them. However, a lot of sources warned that they could be tricky or sneaky and would often mess with you if you didn't respect them. That spring, I began to leave pennies in the woods behind my school and in my backyard. I'm Canadian and we don't use pennies anymore, so I had a lot laying around. I would make a habit of doing it at least once a week. And one week I was really busy and I forgot. The day that I realized I'd forgotten was the day that this weird thing happened. This is all about a ring. It's a gold ring with a bow on the top that has little diamonds inside. It's not real gold, as when I used to wear it, it would always turn my finger green, but it had never tarnished like some of the fake rings do. It was given to me by a girl that we'll call Elle. We were friends as a kid, well, a little more than that, but we were too young to fully grasp the concept of a relationship. It was like any other puppy love between younger kids, except the only difference is that we were both girls. Her parents were really accepting, but my mom never was. We would hold hands a lot and say we loved each other, and we'd give each other little gifts and go on dates. It was all innocent, but my mom hated it. When she found out, I left Elle. I had a flip phone and I used to text her lots, so I ended up telling her that we couldn't talk anymore. Oh, poor Elle. She got really upset and she said that she loved me and that we were supposed to be in each other's lives forever. I didn't want to stop talking to her, but my mom scared me, so we never spoke again. The ring I mentioned before, she gave that to me. It was one of my prized possessions our whole friendship. That winter, I tossed it into the backyard of my house. I have a pretty big yard, and I had a feeling that it was highly unlikely anyone would find it in the rocks or glass. And it would be a few years later that I started the fairy research. That spring, my mom found the ring. Okay, I see. So the friend that you had this really innocent but really beautiful relationship with gave you that ring, and that was several years ago. And then a few years later is when you started doing the fairy offerings and stuff like that. Okay. So she had no clue where it was from, but she gave it back to me assuming it was mine. I couldn't believe that it was found nearly 3 years later. It almost felt like fate in some way, that maybe Elle was taunting me somehow. I knew that was highly unlikely. I'm a little religious, and I have a complicated relationship with religion due to being raised Catholic and fearing God as a lesbian. But when it comes to ghosts and the paranormal, I don't really believe, but I want to. So I kind of brushed the whole thing off. Back to me for getting the offering. I was taking off my rings that day and had my jewelry chest open. In the case was that bow ring that I mentioned just sitting there. I'd picked it up when I was thinking about the whole thing with Elle when it accidentally fell, except something weird happened. Half of my room is carpet and the other half is hardwood floor. When the metal falls on the carpet, it just thuds. It doesn't clink. If it fell on the wood, you'd hear it, right? Well, I just heard a thud, so I assumed that it hit the carpet, but I crawled all over the floor and couldn't find it. I dropped it right by my desk, which was on the far side of my room that was carpeted. The hardwood side was really far, too far for a ring to statistically bounce, especially without me hearing it. The ring turned up a week later behind my chair on the hardwood side of my room. I was so shocked and confused. What? How is that even possible? I know this is a really long story, but if you do read this, thank you. If you have any possible logical explanations as to what could have happened, I would love to know, along with any possible ideas that this could in fact be paranormal. Thank you again, Addie. Thank you, Addie. Wow. I lost a pair of earrings this way once. And I remember when I was in college, I had dropped one of my earrings, and I remember I loved these earrings because they were opal earrings and they did have little real diamonds on them, like tiny little diamonds. But my dad had bought me these earrings for Christmas and I had really loved them, and I was trying to put them in, and I was in my college room, like a big college house, and I dropped one and I could not find that motherfucker. I could not find that thing anywhere. It was just gone. I looked everywhere. I looked in the cracks between like the floor and the floorboards and flashlight, like everything. That thing was just, it was gone. Lo and behold, I did find this earring years later, even though I was long gone from that house. And this earring had fallen into my tape dispenser that was on the dresser where I was getting ready. So remember those like black, like Papermate tape dispensers that have like little crevices in them? It had literally fallen into that, and I didn't see where it had fallen. And so when I was like unpacking or packing or something years later, messed with the tape, it like fell out and stuff like that. So I do have to say, I do think it is just sometimes little trinkets like that can just disappear very, very well, and they won't turn up for forever. So like if it had fallen and you didn't see where it fell, like it could have moved somehow. You said it turned up a week later. Like, is it possible that somebody kicked it, or there was a pet in your house that was playing with it and like moved it to the other side of the room or something like that? I don't know. This does sound very glitch in the matrixy too. It's hard for me to say much more just because I wasn't there, but it is very interesting that this ring keeps like disappearing, but then it's the fact that it disappeared twice and then came back to you twice. You know what I mean? So I don't know. I think this could be just totally logical explanation in terms of there's nothing paranormal, just weird coincidences that you lost this ring multiple times. But maybe it is just kind of a little like poke from the universe about your sexuality, because this person, your friend, was kind of, I don't want to say a sexual awakening because you were too young for that. Like you said, it was very innocent, but just kind of a like one of those things that I would imagine probably 10, 20 years later, you looked back at your friendship with her and you were like, when you realized you were a lesbian, like you said, you were probably like, oh, the dots kind of connected. So maybe the ring is just in there for just in your life. It keeps coming back in your life for that purpose. But yeah, still an interesting story regardless, and I did enjoy it. I do like the idea of maybe the fairies like taking the ring for a little while, and then once they were done with it, they returned it to the yard. I like that. I like that theory. Let's go with that. Okay, the next story for today starts, hello there, Hannah. My name is Sam, and I use they, them pronouns. I have a short story today of a strange encounter with an animal creature that I would love opinions on. This story takes place in our rural property of northern New Hampshire, where I have lived my entire life. I have a lot of experience in the woods and the wildlife that lives in there. One afternoon a few years ago, I was doing barn chores and I had our 2 dogs tied out in the yard nearby so I could keep an eye on them while I worked. I had just finished filling a wheelbarrow full of manure and began wheeling it out of the barn when I glanced over at the dogs. I saw that they were both standing very still and staring intently at a nearby field. No barking at all, only silent staring. The field that they were staring at is roughly a square shape, and one side is a small dirt road, and on the other 3 sides is a forest. As I looked to see what they were staring at, I noticed a large animal with black fur that I initially thought was a Labrador retriever that belonged to our neighbor. Their dog often runs off leash and sometimes ends up wandering onto our property. However, I realized quickly that this animal in the field was not canine at all, but instead a large feline of some kind. When I first saw the animal, it was walking out of the woods. When it got towards the middle of the field, it seemed to sense that it was being looked at. It stood still for a moment and looked in our direction. At this point, I got a very good look at it, and it really looked like some kind of panther or leopard standing there. The big cat head shape, the long tail with a rounded curved end, etc. It had also walked past some weed/bushes that let me get an idea of the size, which was definitely the height of or slightly taller than a large dog. After pausing for a moment, it quickly ran/bounced away into the woods on the other side of the field. I waited a while, finished dumping the wheelbarrow, and then I walked over in hopes that there would be some dirt/sand near the bushes and that there might be paw prints left behind. Unfortunately, there was no prints that I could find. If this is a case of mistaken identity, then I'm really not sure what it could possibly be. In this region, the only wild cat that exists is the bobcat, which I have seen up close a few times, and I knew that it was definitely not one of those. Wrong color, body, and size. There used to be mountain lions here, but a long time ago, they were all hunted out. Though there are many locals that claim to have seen them in the area, but they're not officially recognized. That being said, usually mountain lions are not jet black. Some family and friends have claimed that what I saw was a fisher cat, which is a species of large weasel and not actually a cat, but the body type of a fisher cat is not the same as the animal that I saw. Another thing that I think is very telling is how the dogs reacted. I have seen the dogs react to a bear, deer, coyote, fox, etc., and they will always bark and go into the general intruder alert freakout mode. They will also do this when the neighbor's dog or stray cats come onto our property. Yet in this instance, they just stared together, very still and quiet. I think they didn't know how to gauge the threat level of the unfamiliar animal. To add something more, several years before this incident, my aunt was driving by our home and claimed that a large black cat ran across the road in front of her. However, her experience was at night and she only saw it in her headlights. So I often wonder, if this was a big panther type cat, how did it get there? Is it someone's escaped illegal pet? Is it a strangely mutated mountain lion that it has managed to hide in the shadows for years? Or to take it to a more paranormal place, was this some kind of shape-shifting entity? I really don't know, but whenever I walk in the woods, I'm always looking up in the trees, wondering if I'll see some kind of black leopard looking down at me. I hope you enjoyed this little story. I love your videos, Sam. Thank you so much, Sam. You experienced what we call in the cryptid/paranormal business an ABC. ABC stands for alien big cat. So there is this phenomenon that seems to happen in certain parts of the world, but there's been reports like all over. So ABCs are big cats that are spotted in places where they're not supposed to be, spotted in places where they don't typically live. Many countries have reported seeing these out in the wild, and they are unexplained. These are technically a mystery. I don't know if they're a cryptid. I don't personally think that they're a cryptid. Some people believe that they're a cryptid. I don't personally believe this. I think that there's probably a logical explanation for it. However, it doesn't change the fact that this seems to really be a thing. People have gotten pictures of it, but this has never officially been explained. Now, typically the most popular explanation for these is, like you said, somebody's escaped pet. So it could be that this is an exotic pet that somebody has that they're not supposed to have and it gets out. The other theory that I personally subscribe to that I like is that most of the time these are cats that escaped from a zoo. If a cat or two cats escape from a zoo and they mate, if they find somebody else to mate with, if multiple cats escape from the zoo, there could be a small population of these cats living out and about, or it's just the actual cat from the zoo itself. That would explain why the sightings are so rare, but why so many sightings have happened around the world. However, of course, I don't know that for sure. Like I said, there's not been like a definitive answer to this phenomenon, but it is an interesting phenomenon. I would look that up if you haven't already. Look up alien big cats if you'd like to do more research, especially for a storyteller if they want to learn more about it. So thank you, Sam. Thank you so much for your story. Something new to talk about on the channel. I always love that. Okay, we have one more story to read today, and this is a pretty long one, and this is from another person named Rose, which was total coincidence. So, hey Hannah, it's human. My name is Rose and I don't mind not being anonymous, and my pronouns are they, them. I have two stories that kind of go together because of a new development to one of them that happened when my mom and I were discussing strange occurrences. Note, I would say that I'm a skeptical believer and have actually not had many strange/spooky things happen to me in my life at all. Even explainable, real kinds of scary things are an extreme rarity in my life. For some context, I live in the Midwest, almost on the border between Illinois and Wisconsin. I'll start with the time that I saw what are apparently known as night crawlers or crawlers. These are not related in any way to the Fresno night crawlers or any similar cryptid. They basically resemble the rake. Oh, interesting. I didn't know that. Trying to Google these things is next to impossible because they share the same name as the thing in Fresno, and I only discovered the name for them through my online friend who lives in around Appalachia. Anyway, on to the story. It was the middle of summer a few years ago, and I was at my family home off from school. I had been storming all day, and later that night, at around 9 or 10 p.m., the tornado sirens went off. My family takes weather events very seriously, so everyone was going through the routine of gathering some necessities and going down to our basement. I was the last to head to the basement stairs. To give a visual, while standing at the top of these stairs as if you were about to go down, directly to the right is the front door area, the foyer, with the front door less than 15 feet away. On the other side of my front door are vertical windows about 7 or so inches wide and the same height as the door, and regular large windows on either side of them. There are no curtains on the windows, so they give a very clear view of our front porch. As I stood at the top of the basement steps, I looked towards the front door just to see how heavy the rain was outside. It was dark by this point, but we had the porch light on, so the porch area and about 10 feet of the yard in front of it was very well lit. I say all of this because when I looked over, I saw something clear as day that will never leave my mind. It looked like a naked man with a very, very pale skin running across the yard in front of the porch on all fours. It wasn't larger than an average man, but its limbs seemed way too long and thin, and it was too fast for me to see its face. I could also tell that it was definitely something humanoid because its knees clearly bent the way a human's would, and I could make out the shape of human hands and human feet as it ran. The way it ran was also far too natural for a human. Even those videos of feral children or furries running on all fours didn't look like this. Of course, I was frozen in place and just felt my stomach drop when I saw that. Nothing has given me quite the flight or freeze response of pure dread as that moment did. Not even when a full-grown stag pranced up to my cousins and me in my grandparents' neighborhood, which had this sense of wonder with the fear. But that's another story. This thing didn't run up to the house or anything, just across the front yard. So with no sense of immediate danger, I got myself to just continue on down to the basement. I didn't dare say a word to my parents about it because my dad has horrible anxiety about weather and gets uneasy about the unexplained, so I didn't want to worsen that. But I could not stop thinking about what it could be. Obviously, my first thought was that it was somebody maybe on drugs, not in their right mind, but that just didn't make any sense. While my county does have a meth problem, as many Midwest and American cities more broadly do, it didn't make sense for the location of my neighborhood. My neighborhood is not near the rest of the city. It's full of big houses tucked away behind some tree lines and a nature reserve. It's literally laid out. Tree line, a grand total of 3 cul-de-sacs, and marshy forest behind it. The road beyond any of that are secluded and only consist of other tiny, newly developed, secluded neighborhoods. It would take someone 45 minutes at the very fastest to get to the rest of the city to our house on foot, and that's if they were beelining it to my neighborhood. Not to mention it was pouring rain during a tornado, so if it was an addict seeking shelter, I think that they would go into well-lit houses literally surrounding them, even in their altered state of mind. This thing seemed like an animal running away from a sudden loud siren and then got spooked further by the house lights. I also doubt that it was any neighbor because we're all rather reclusive neighbors, even on the best of days. All of this to say is that I have trouble believing that it was an actual person, even if it clearly looked like one. I've never encountered something like that before and haven't since then, so it was just purely bizarre. Fast forward to this year, and I was talking to my online friends about it. They told me that they call those things night crawlers or crawlers, and that they usually hang out in wooded or swampy areas, but occasionally come out into nearby neighborhoods. The horrible storm going on probably didn't help and could have drawn it out. This friend told me that they're not necessarily malicious nor good, but simply another wild animal that shouldn't be messed with, which I fully understand and was definitely the vibe that I got from it. It was just another animal looking for cover from the storm and probably the sound of the sirens. My second story happened when I was in high school. I was home alone on the family computer. It was either the weekend or I was sick because it was at noon to mid-afternoon at the latest. Nobody was home because my younger sister was at school, my dad was at work, my mom went to an appointment or was running an errand or something, and all of my older siblings have since moved out of the house. I was upstairs and had my headphones on when I thought I heard some sort of music playing that wasn't coming from my headphones. Slipping them off to check, as one does, this was a rare moment where, yes, I was hearing music that wasn't coming from my headphones. Sometimes my neighbors play music loudly from their garage or driving by on their motorcycles, but this was clearly not that because it was not actual music. It was music box music, like the wind-up crank toy kind that usually plays lullabies. It was especially odd though because it wasn't a song that I recognized even as an avid classical music enjoyer and a lullaby/fairy tale enthusiast. I was a little uneasy but not scared because I just wanted to figure out where it was coming from. Getting up, I still walked as silently and slowly as I could to pinpoint the direction and follow the sound. I thought that maybe it was coming from a broken toy in my sister's room, also upstairs, or something, but I soon realized that it wasn't coming from upstairs at all. Now feeling a little more uneasy, I went downstairs and did the same walkthrough, listening for its direction. It sounded closer at one end of the house, so I went to the windows to see or listen if it was coming from a neighbor. But then I realized that it wasn't coming from outside at all. It was coming from the basement. Needless to say, as soon as I realized I heard it clearest at the basement entrance, I was a little freaked out. At this point, you might think that it was some old toy stored in the basement, but I used to love old music boxes and knew every single one that we had, where they were, and what music they played. This was absolutely, without a doubt, none of them. But I'm not the type to outwardly freak out when I was scared. No shame to those that do. It's just my natural instinct to go quiet and still when I get filled with adrenaline. So I slowly and silently went back upstairs and locked myself in my room until I heard my mom come home. The music stopped before she came home though, so I was the only one to hear it, and I didn't mention anything to either of my parents. The last point is important to remember because just a few weeks ago, there was a new development to this story. I was talking with my mom about the supernatural casually one day in the kitchen. She's a very spiritually sensitive person, occasional prophetic dreams, sensing energies, has many strange stories to share, both good and bad, very in tune with nature and the spirit. So the topic is a comfortable and frequent one between us. I've always been fascinated with the strange, dark, and mysterious, peep the Mr. Ballin reference, so I decided to finally bring up my weird nightcrawler encounter. The very next thing she said was along the lines of, "Oh wow, that is weird. You know, it hasn't happened much, but I've had a few weird things happen while we've lived here too, like feeling weird things or hearing music coming from somewhere I couldn't figure out." That kind of floored me. I told her, that's weird that you actually say that because I've heard music coming from inside the house when no one was home, like a music box music, and it was coming from the basement. Her response, she had apparently heard the same music coming from the same place. We even both had the same experience where it happened once randomly and then never again. Remember, I have never mentioned this story to her or anyone that she would have heard it from, undoubtedly. We independently had similar experiences one time and never again, and I still have no explanation that satisfyingly debunks it. So those are my stories. I have some more, like my mom's prophetic dreams or the fact that I somehow am scarily similar to my grandmother despite me not knowing her well and her dying before I could really know anything about her. Or my ultra rare chickenpox reaction. Nothing too scary, just kind of weird. Let me know if you'd like to hear any of them in the future. Thank you so much for reading my stories if you did, and I adore you and your channel. You present topics so respectfully and thoroughly while being a relaxing presence and voice. Stay spooky, Rose. Thank you. You guys are so freaking sweet. Every single day, it makes my day just being reminded from so many people that write in their stories about how long they've been watching my main channel or just that they like my voice or whatever. It's ridiculously sweet. Thank you so much. Thank you so much for the story, Rose. Yeah, wow, what the hell? Again, the only possible logical explanation I have is nothing that is going to be more likely than a ghost, like more likely than a haunting? What if somebody that lived at that house before you, is it possible that people that lived there before you, if there's a crawl space somewhere and they put a music box somewhere in the walls, like down in the basement or under a floorboard in the basement or something like that? I don't know why it would be going off long enough for you to hear it and actively pursue it, though, is the only thing. That's kind of why that theory doesn't make a lot of sense, because music boxes have to be wound up unless it is some sort of device that is meant to randomly go, but that just doesn't make any sense, right? Like over possibly years or years later, just to mess with people when you don't live there anymore, to enjoy the reaction of the prank, like just doesn't make a lot of sense. So that, I will admit, that is extremely bizarre and I don't have a logical explanation. And as for the Nightcrawler too, that does sound very rake-like. I will say that does sound very much like a rake-like creature. Sometimes we see weird creatures that look like werewolves or like cryptids, and it's a dog with mange, with the skin condition that like takes a lot of their hair off, or another animal with mange. Lots of animals can get mange, and I think it's a parasite, but it makes them look crazy. Here, just a warning, I'm going to show you a picture. It's kind of sad, but just warning. Okay. So like, here's a picture of mange. The thing that's tripping me up though is that you said that you could see that it had like a human-like head and human-like hands and feet, but just was not human. So obviously that's very bizarre. But if you only saw a flash of it, is it possible that it was an animal with mange that was then running from the sirens and stuff like that? I don't know. That again sounds like kind of a stretch, but it is a possible explanation. Again, if you were kind of in a heightened state because of the sirens and the tornado and having to get down to the basement, and then if you saw it just run and then you didn't really get a really, really good look at it, you just kind of got a glance at it, that's possible. But like I said, I wasn't there. Only you really know what you saw for sure. So yeah. Thank you so much, Rose. Thank you so much to everybody for all of their stories. This was day 5. And yeah, I think we're going to keep going. So I'll see you guys all tomorrow. Thank you so much for watching. Please like the video and subscribe if you like watching videos like this. Please don't subscribe if you're not interested in watching most of the videos or some of the videos, just because that doesn't help any creator. So if you're interested in watching these types of videos when they come out, please subscribe. And I will see you all tomorrow / the next one. Okay, bye.